The sun hung low over the jagged hills of New Mexico, painting the desert in streaks of molten gold and blood red. Dust swirled across the old ranch as a lone figure leaned against the wooden fence, squinting toward the horizon. It had been 20 years since anyone had knocked on that weathered door. 20 years of silence, broken only by the distant howl of coyotes and the whispering wind through the mesquite. Jackson Cole, once a cowboy renowned across 3 counties for his skill with horses and his fearlessness in the line of danger, now lived alone. His ranch was a skeleton of its former self, barns sagging, fences creaking, the fields slowly being swallowed by weeds. Jackson had traded the roar of cattle drives and the camaraderie of the dusty trail for solitude, his only companions the stars at night and memories of a life that had left him behind. Loneliness had become a familiar friend. He didn't mind it, not really. People had come and gone in his life, some betrayed him, others left too soon. His wife, Mary, had died young, leaving him with a silence that no whiskey, no guitar, no campfire stories could fill. And his children, grown and scattered, had lives that didn't involve an aging rancher living on a plot of land most folks called cursed. Jackson understood being alone. He understood it too well. But that evening, as he surveyed the land, he noticed something unusual, a small cloud of dust approaching from the old trail. At first, he thought it was a wandering horse, or perhaps some desperate traveler, but as the figures drew closer, he realized there were 5 women, walking slowly, carrying nothing but the weight of grief on their shoulders. Their clothes were simple but worn, dust clinging to the hems and the edges. Their faces, etched with sorrow, held stories of loss and survival. Apache widows, they would have been called, displaced by hardship and circumstance, with no home and no one to turn to. They moved with the quiet dignity of people who had endured far too much, yet there was a fragile hope in their eyes, a hope that led them straight to Jackson Cole's ranch. Jackson's hand instinctively rested on the butt of his old revolver. Not because he intended to harm them, but because the sight of humans, real, living, breathing humans, approaching his solitude made him uneasy. He had long ago built walls around himself, thick and unyielding, and the idea of letting anyone through was terrifying. As they drew nearer, the tallest of the women stepped forward. Her voice was soft, almost melodic, but carried a firmness that demanded attention. "Sir," she said, "we mean you no harm. We've nowhere else to go. Please, would you let us shelter here for a while?" Jackson studied her for a long moment. Her eyes, dark and deep, mirrored the pain in his own heart. He wanted to say no, to tell them the ranch was empty except for the ghosts that already lived there. But as he opened his mouth, the wind carried her words back to him, and something inside him stirred, something he hadn't felt in decades. 5 widows, huh? He said gruffly, voice like gravel. "You sure this isn't SME trick?" "No trick," she replied. "Just need." Jackson's heart, buried beneath layers of solitude, wavered. He had seen enough suffering in his time to know it when he saw it. Slowly, almost reluctantly, he nodded. "All right, come in. But stay outside the house until I've had a chance to assess." They nodded in gratitude, settling on the open land. Jackson watched them carefully as they began unpacking small bundles and water jugs. They moved quietly, respecting his space, and in that quiet respect, Jackson felt a flicker of something he thought he had lost long ago, trust in humanity. The first days were awkward. Jackson, a man of routine and silence, struggled with their presence. The women, sensing his discomfort, offered their help cautiously, mending fences, gathering firewood, tending to the small vegetable plot he had once loved. They never imposed, but their quiet diligence began to soften the edges of his solitude. In the evenings, by the fire, Jackson would listen to their stories, fragments of life before the loss, tales of courage and survival, of husbands taken too soon by sickness or violence, of families scattered by the ever-changing tides of life. He found himself sharing a little, too, his own memories spilling out like water long trapped behind a dam. It was during one particularly cold night that the transformation began in earnest. The wind howled like a banshee, rattling the windows of the old ranch house, and one of the younger widows, Anna, shivered in the corner. Jackson took off his coat and draped it around her shoulders. "You need it more than I do," he muttered, though his voice betrayed a warmth he hadn't expected to show. "You've given us warmth already," Anna said softly, her eyes shining in the firelight. "Just by letting us stay." Jackson grunted, but something inside him shifted. The walls he had built around himself, brick by brick, began to crumble. He realized he had been living in exile not because of the world, but because of fear, fear of loss, fear of being hurt, fear of having to care again. And yet, these women, strangers with empty hands and hearts heavy with grief, had come asking for nothing but kindness, and in doing so, they had offered him a gift far greater than gold or land, a reason to live again. Days turned into weeks, and slowly, the ranch came alive. Horses were brushed and fed, fences repaired, gardens planted with careful attention. The women, each with her own story of resilience, became a family of sorts. Laughter began to echo across the land once more, timid at first, then full-bodied and free, like water rushing through a long dry creek bed. Jackson, for his part, began to change as well. The quiet evenings by the fire became times of storytelling and teaching. He taught the widows to ride, to care for the horses, to shoot if necessary, skills he had once thought lost to time. In return, they shared knowledge of herbal remedies, cooking, and the subtler arts of survival, rooted in their Apache heritage. It was during the Harvest Festival, a small celebration they held in honor of the land finally yielding fruit again, that Jackson had a moment of profound realization. Watching the women dance under lantern light, faces glowing with joy and hope, he understood something fundamental: life was never meant to be endured alone. He had spent decades hiding from the world, building walls to protect himself from the inevitability of pain. But pain and love were two sides of the same coin, one could not exist without the other. By opening his ranch to these widows, Jackson had invited both. And in doing so, he had reclaimed the very thing he thought he had lost forever: his heart. One evening, as the sky blazed with the colors of sunset, the tallest widow, Maria, approached him while he worked on mending a fence. "Jackson," she said, her voice gentle yet commanding, "why did you let us stay? After all these years alone, why take the risk?" Jackson paused, hammer in hand, and looked out across the land he had once thought desolate. He saw the laughter of children, some of the widows had small ones with them, running through the fields, saw the horses prancing freely, the house alive with the smells of cooking and wood smoke. "I reckon," he said finally, "I was tired of being lonely. And maybe, I needed you all as much as you needed me." Her eyes glistened, and she placed a hand on his arm, a silent acknowledgement of a bond forged not by blood, but by shared survival and mutual care. Seasons changed, and the ranch flourished like never before. The widows, once wandering souls with nothing to call home, had built lives rooted in the land and in each other. Jackson found himself laughing more than he had in decades, teaching the children to ride and the women to shoot, sitting by the fire at night telling stories of the old cowboy days. Years later, travelers passing by would speak in hushed tones of the ranch where the retired cowboy had taken in 5 Apache widows, and how the land itself seemed to glow with warmth and life. The story became legend, not because of heroics or violence, but because of humanity and generosity, and how one man's choice to care transformed the lives of many. Jackson often stood on the porch at sunset, looking out over the fields. He would see the children chasing chickens, the widows tending to the garden, and hear laughter, pure, unrestrained laughter, echoing across the hills. And he would remember the first day they had arrived, their eyes filled with desperation, and he would smile. "Turns out," he'd mutter to himself, "you can survive alone, but you don't truly live, not until you let life in." And with that, the retired cowboy, once bound by grief and solitude, had finally discovered a truth older than the land itself. Kindness is its own reward, and love, in all its forms, has the power to heal even the most weathered heart. The ranch, alive with life and laughter, stood as a testament not to the wealth of the land, but to the richness of the human spirit, and the enduring power of opening your heart when the world has taught you to close it.